Hey, what's up? Jack here with DevSlopes.com. Welcome back to the Southern Command Center. And today we are going to do something a little different. Before we get started building our main API for this course, I'm going to take you through just a small walkthrough, kind of a hello world example that we do in most programming languages. We're going to build a hello world API type project. And this is going to take us from beginning to end. We're going to push it up to Bluemix, and I'm going to show you what that's all about. We're going to go into more depth a little bit later on in some later lessons on everything. This is just kind of a general walkthrough, a general overview, just to kind of give you a taste of where we're heading. Now, it is going to be pretty simplified. It's just going to be a real simple API with 2 or 3 endpoints. They're just going to be GET requests. We're not going to be posting anything. We're not going to be connecting to a database. We're just going to be returning some static data. But we'll go ahead and get started walking through this, and you'll see what I mean. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up my terminal. And I'm going to go to my desktop and make a directory hello API. And then we're going to use our Swift Package Manager to create our Swift package. And if we do an ls, you see here we've got our generated files there. Now we need to go to the Swift package catalog. So we're going to click on IBM Swift Package Catalog, and we're going to grab Kitura. So we're going to go there, and I'm going to click Include Project in your code and copy. And we're going to come here, and we're going to open up our package.swift file. And then right out here after the name, we're going to make a new key here called dependencies. And that's an array. And we're going to paste that line in there. And the only ones we're worried about for this one is we want Helium Logger. So we're going to grab that one as well. And we'll come back over here. We'll paste that in. And then I'm also going to want to use, since we're going to be publishing it to Bluemix, we want to use a package called Swift-cfenv. And what this is going to do, it's the Cloud Foundry environment. This is a package that will let us get environment variables about our Cloud Foundry environment, which Bluemix is a Cloud Foundry service. Okay, so by default here when I'm clicking this, it's telling me has a tag in an incompatible format. So I'm going to change this to version 2.03, and we'll grab that. So let's do that, and then paste that in. All right, and on these packages here, one thing you can do is you can leave off this minor version altogether. You could just have major version 1, major version 2 here, and I believe it will get the latest available version, compatible version in that major version range. But we'll go ahead and leave this as it is. I'm going to go ahead, I'm not sure if I would have any issues, but I'm going to go ahead and add the .get here. The only one that I'm positive about is the CouchDB package. Alright, so we've got those added. We've got Kitura, Helium Logger, and the cfenv package. And I think that's all we need. Let's go ahead and save that. and we can do Swift build. And that's going to go out and grab all those packages and compile everything. And if we have success here, then we can go ahead and move on. So I'm going to go ahead and pause this for a second, and I'll be right back. All right, so we're back. Everything downloaded, compiled. We should be good to go here. By default, when we created this, we can just take a look here. It just, by default, the source file just has print hello world there. So we can actually run this. And you see we get hello world printed on the screen. So now that we've got all our packages installed, downloaded and built, and I'm not sure if I mentioned this in the other video or not about the package manager. But when we generate an Xcode project, if you do any changes with your dependencies or anything, you may have to delete your project file and recreate it. Because Xcode isn't in sync, because we're building this from the command line. In these packages, Xcode isn't working with the package manager that close. Once you get all of your packages downloaded and everything's built, then Xcode will build everything fine. But if you generate the Xcode project and then you go back later and add a package to your package.swift file, you'll more than likely have to delete the XC project folder and then recreate it with the new dependencies in there. But with that being said, let's do Swift package generate Xcode proj. Alright, so now we've got our Xcode project, so now we can just simply do open hello API Xcode project. So here's our project. And here's all our sources. These are the dependencies. Here's our package.swift file. And here's our main.swift file. Now from here you see we've got a couple of schemes. We want to change this to this executable and click on my Mac there. You have to do that in order to be able to run it. But we're going to go ahead and hit Command B to build it and just make sure everything builds okay. Alright, looks like everything built just fine, so we're good to go. So at this point, we've got it loaded up in Xcode and it's building fine. We could hit run here, and we should see in our console down here, hello world, once it runs. And there we do, and you see the program ended. So let's go ahead and go back, and we're going to go ahead and start adding some code here. So we're going to import Foundation. We're going to import Kitura. We're going to import Logger API, which works hand in hand with Helium Logger to provide log messages. And we're going to import Helium Logger. Now we're going to wrap this in a do block here. A do catch block. And if we catch an error, we're going to print the localized description of the error. And then we're going to say server did not start. And these are just informational messages where if we do catch an error in this do block, it's going to log these messages to the console. Now, the first thing I'm going to do here is do heliumlogger.use, and we're going to set the logger message type to .info, and we're going to I'm going to add some code here that we haven't created yet. We're going to have a controller, which is going to be in another file, but we will remedy that here in just a minute. So what we're doing here is we're going to create an instance of this controller that we're about to create here in just a minute. And then we're going to log a message to the console that says server will be started on, and the URL will be specified in that controller. And we will cover that here in just a minute. And then we're going to run Kitura. We're going to say Kitura.add HTTP server. And for the port, we're going to specify that in the controller as well. And width and the router is going to be in the controller. So controller.router. And the only thing left to do in main here is just to run it. So then we just need to say Kitura.run, and that's going to start the run loop. So at this point, we will have created our controller, which will have the URL, the port, and also the router object in it. And then we're going to kick off Kitura, the run loop in Kitura, to keep running and listening for events. So we need to create a new file here in our Hello API group here. And it's just going to be a Swift file. And we're just going to call it controller.swift. And for some reason, it added it to the Logger API target over here. We need it in the Hello API target. And then we're going to leave Foundation imported here, and we're also going to import Kitura. We're going to import Swifty JSON. We're going to use a little bit of JSON here, and Swifty JSON is a package. It's a pretty popular package, and Kitura uses it for JSON parsing. And so since we got Kitura and that's a dependency, we already have it, so we're going to use it. We're going to import Logger API. We're also going to import Cloud Foundry environment, which is that CFEnv package that we got. All right. So now we need to make our controller. So we're going to do public class controller. And keep in mind, this is just a very simplistic walkthrough that we're doing here. But we need to create our router, so we're going to let router, and it's going to be of type router. And if we look here, what that is the router class is provided by Kitura here. It handles routing requests and responses and everything. Or actually, like I misspoke, it handles the requests. So basically, when you make a request, it's going to go through the router to get to the right place. So we're going to say let app-env, and that's going to be of type app-env. And if we look at that, that's provided by the Cloud Foundry environment package. All right, we need a URL, and that's going to be a string. And what we're going to do here is we're going to have a getter. And that's going to be part of our app-env object here. If we click on that, that's where we specified the app-env right here of this type. And then the URL is provided by, it's part of that struct in the Cloud Foundry environment. And what this Cloud Foundry environment will do is if we're running on Bluemix or any Cloud Foundry environment for that matter, it will attempt to read these environment variables, and if they're not set, it goes and sets some logical defaults. So for the URL, for instance, it will set localhost. So if we're running it locally and there's no Cloud Foundry environment, it'll run it on localhost. So we need a port. And a port is going to be an integer. We're going to have a getter for that, and it's going to be the same type thing. We're going to pull that from this app-env object here. And if we click on URL here, this takes us to the to this app-env.swift file here, and this is provided through that package that we got. And if we search for, just say localhost, you see here we've got this function parse URLs. And you see here if it is local, then the URI is going to be this local host and the port. So that's where that's going to default to if we're not running in Cloud Foundry. If we are running in Cloud Foundry, in a Cloud Foundry environment, then it will get the URL that we're running on. Same way with port. If we go to port, and just for instance, I know it defaults to 8080. You can see here if we don't have this vcap app port, if that's not set, then it's going to default to port 8080. So it will set logical defaults if we are not running in a Cloud Foundry environment. All right, now then, we need an initializer, and this will throw. We need to try Cloud Foundry environment.get app.env. And what this is going to attempt to do is, if we are running in a Cloud Foundry environment, it's going to try to get the environment variables that are set. So we need to set a router or create a router. And then we're going to have an endpoint here just for the root and a handler. And we'll just call it get main. All right, and that's pretty much all we need in our initializer right now. We're going to expand on this in a minute. But it's complaining because we don't have that function yet. So we've got to create that. So we're going to create a public function, get main. And this is going to have a request, which is a router request. A response, which is a router response. And then next, which is a closure. And we have to mark this as escaping. If you're familiar with Swift, you know on the closures in Swift 3, they changed the default to non-escaping. So if there's a chance that the closure is going to execute after that function is over, then you've got to mark it as escaping. And we're going to mark this as throws as well. So we're going to log.debug, and we're just going to log here where we're at. So basically when we hit this function, it's going to log this get to the console that we're getting the root endpoint or the root URL here. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create some JSON. So I'm just going to say var JSON is equal to JSON. And then in parentheses, we're just going to create an empty JSON object here. Now, if we look at this JSON, you notice I capitalized it here. If we look at that, you see it's declared in Swifty JSON. So this is a JSON object declared in Swifty JSON, which is this package we've got. Swifty JSON makes it really nice to work with JSON instead of having to serialize and deserialize it. So we're just going to say course.string value is equal to beginner APIs with Swift, Kitura, and Bluemix. And then we're going to set the, I'll just say my name, string value is equal to Jack Davis. And we'll set company string value is equal to DevSlopes. So that's all the JSON I'm going to construct here. And then at this point, we're going to try to send that as a response. And we're going to send JSON like so, and then we've got to end it. If we don't end it here, it'll just sit there and hang. But if we look at, so we've got this response, which is a router response. And if we look at status, it's provided by Kitura. It sets the status code. And OK is provided in Kitura Net. There's different status messages you can send, like bad request or internal server error and things like that. OK is your 200 response. And then we've got send, which is provided by Kitura. And then we're using the JSON version of that, so it's going to send that JSON. And then end is provided by Kitura, and it ends the response. And it does throw, which is why we marked this throw, and we had to mark try here. So with this done, we're pretty much done. We're going to add just a few things here in a little bit, but let's go ahead and build this and make sure everything builds. With no errors. And it looks like we succeeded. So at this point, we should be able to run this. So I'm going to click run. And it asks me if I want to allow incoming network connections. I'm going to click allow. And then I'm going to pull up Postman here. And I've got a lot of things open here. Let me close these out. Okay, so we've got Postman open. So it's a GET request that we're after. And the URL is localhost port 8080. So let's just hit send and see what we get. Okay, so I hit send and we can see our response here. We got this JSON object. Company is DevSlopes. My name is Jack Davis. Course is Beginner APIs with Swift, Kitura, and Bluemix. So we've got our first Kitura project up and running. Everything's working great. Let's go ahead and stop it and let's add some more stuff. So what else are we going to add? Well, since we're not going to use a database, let's just create an array of dictionary objects. So we've got an array here, and now we just need some dictionary objects in here. And we're going to do vehicles. So the first one we're going to have a make of Nissan, model of Murano, and a year of 2017. So we're going to have a comma. We'll add about 3 vehicles in here. And we'll do my daughter's vehicle next. So I think you can get the idea here. Wife has the new vehicle. Daughter has the almost new vehicle. What do you think I've got? Well, not too bad. Dodge Ram, that's a pretty nice truck. Want, 2012. Of course, I'm driving the old vehicle. Oh well, it's a good truck. So we've got a vehicle array here, and these are our dictionary objects. And what we're going to do is we're going to create another route, and we'll just add it right here. And this is just going to be a get for vehicles. And we'll just make a function called get all vehicles. How about that? So we'll just skip down here and create another function. And we've got a request. A response, and then our closure for next. if I can type tonight. Okay, so there is our function body or declaration. And now then, let's go ahead and let's just say let JSON is equal to JSON. And we'll just pass in that vehicle array. Just like that. So what this is going to do, it's going to convert that vehicle array of dictionary here into JSON. At that point, all we've got to do is just say try response.status.ok.send, and we're going to do JSON and then end it. Pretty simple. Pretty cool stuff. And like I said, if you're using a database, instead of pulling from this array here, you would just, make your database call there and return that as JSON. So let's go ahead and build this again. Make sure I don't have any typos or anything. And let's go ahead and run. Allow. Okay, so we've still got this route. Let's go ahead and hit send to make sure it's still good. And now we can append the vehicles endpoint there. And now you see we've got our array of JSON objects. We've got the Nissan Murano, the Nissan Rogue, and the Dodge Ram. So we're getting all of our vehicles back. So let's go ahead and stop it. Now let's do one better. Let's go ahead and create one more route, and we'll end it there. And we'll just keep going the way we're going. We'll just say vehicles, and we'll just do a random vehicle. So we're going to do vehicles/random, and the handler is going to be get random vehicle. So let me make a little space here. So we've got to create our function. So we got a router request, response, router response. Next is our closure. Just like we've been doing. Now then, in order to get our random, we need an index. So I think how we'll handle is we'll just say let index equals int arc for random uniform, and then the vehicle array.count is going to be an integer, and arc for random uniform needs an int 30 or uint 32. So we'll cast that. So we'll just say uint 32, and we'll do vehicle array.count. Now we don't have to worry about this exceeding the bounds, because this is the upper bound. In other words, it will not get to the count here. It will be one less than that. If we wanted to index all the way up to the count, then we would have to add a +1 on the end here. But since this is the upper bound, we're safe by just putting vehicle array.count here. All right. So then we're just going to say let JSON equals JSON. We're going to do our vehicle array and then index. So what we're doing is we're getting a random number that's 0 to 2. And then we're going to grab out of this array up here index 0, 1, or 2 by at random. And then we'll have that right here in JSON. So at that point, all we've got to do is just say try response status, and we're going to send JSON and end it. So that should be all we have to do. Let's go ahead and build it and make sure it builds. All right, let's run it. Make sure it runs. Allow. All right, so original endpoint still works. Vehicles endpoint still works. Vehicle/random. And now we just have the Murano. We hit it again a few times. You see now we got the RAM. And there's the Rogue. So our random vehicle is working. So yeah, we're good to go. That's all there is to it. All right, so we've got our API built. Now, like I said, simplified, very simple API. But one thing we haven't done is we haven't tested it on Linux. Now, when you're building server-side Swift projects with Kitura, or anything for that matter, you need to be sure that you test it on Linux. If it's going to be run on a cloud platform that runs Linux, then you need to test it on Linux. There's a few reasons. Number one, right now with me running it in Xcode, we're using the foundation that's provided by Apple. The open source Swift foundation is not as complete as the Apple foundation that we're running now. So there are things that are left out there that are not available on Linux that are available on Mac. Now, if you're going to host this on a Mac, some type of a hosting service that does Mac hosting, you'll be okay. But if you're going to host it on Linux, then you need to test it on Linux. So let's go ahead. Let me pause this for just a second and I'll be right back and we'll get that going. All right, so let me go ahead and minimize Postman here. Minimize my browser and we'll come back to our terminal. And I think the way we're going to test it on Linux is we're going to use Docker Compose that I talked about before in a previous lesson. So we need a Docker Compose .yaml file. So what we need here, we'll just call it app. And we're going to use the IBM com Swift Ubuntu package or image. And for ports, we're going to use 8080. We're going to map that to our local machine here. And then volumes. Again, the dot is the current directory, and we're going to map that to root/hello-API. And then for our command, we're going to run bash-c. And we're going to change directory to root/hello-API. And these ampersands will let us run a series of commands one after the other. So we're going to do swift build --clean. Well, and swift build and build debug hello-API. So what we've got here, the image we're going to use is this Swift Ubuntu image. If you'll remember, that's the Docker image that IBM provides to test your apps in a Docker container. We're going to map port 8080 to port 8080 on the local machine. We're going to map the local drive to the root/hello-API folder in our container. And then we're going to run a bash command. And we're going to first change directory into root hello-API. Once that's done, we're going to do swift build --clean. That's going to clean the project. Then we're going to do a swift build. And then once that's done, we're going to execute this build debug hello-API executable. So let me save that. And if everything is well, we can do Docker Compose up. And this is going to grab that image and fire up that container and build everything, and we'll see what goes. I'm going to give you a warning. We're going to get an error here, and I'll explain it in a minute. I'll tell you why. I'm not going to pause it because I want you to see what I'm talking about here. And there's our error. Okay, so what's this error telling us? So if we look here, we see that our error is in controller.swift line 60. And it says error use of unresolved identifier arc4 random uniform. Do you remember when I was telling you that you need to test on Linux because all of Foundation is not available on Linux? This is a perfect example. So arc4 random uniform is not provided. We don't have access to it in Linux. So after doing some research, I found the solution, or a solution to it. We need to come back up here to our import statements. And we can use compiler preprocessor directives. And we can do a hashtag if, and then OS, and then in parentheses Linux. So what this is saying, if the OS is Linux, and then we can add an else here. And then our end if. Alright, so if the OS is Linux, what we're going to do is we're going to import glibc. And if it's not, we're going to import Darwin. I'm not 100% sure that we need to import Darwin here, but I'm going to do it anyway. It won't hurt anything. So once we have that, then we could come down and we can use srandom and random to do our random number. So right down here, we're going to put some more preprocessor directives in here. So if the OS is Linux, we're going to do a couple things. And then we're going to take actually, I think we can do we can put the count there maybe. Make sure I don't get an error. And then I can take this line, this let index line here, and I can paste that in there. Okay, now what are we doing here? Well, I went and looked at some man pages, and Linux has this thing called random and srandom. Now what srandom does is it seeds the random number generator, and you just give it some value in here, and by convention what I found a lot of people did was that they threw in NS date time interval since 1970. That gave it a big long number to seed the random number generator. And then we just assign index to a random number modulo vehicle array.count. So it's going to take this big long number and divide by this right here and leave us with the remainder. And by doing the math here, it's going to leave us with either a 0, 1, or a 2. Which is exactly what we're looking for. But this is only going to happen if we're running on Linux. If we're running on anything else, it's going to go ahead and use this arc4 random uniform statement that we did here. So now that we made that change, we should be good to go. So let's go ahead and build it and make sure we don't have any errors here. and we can go ahead and fire it up. Pull Postman back up, and you see we're still getting our results here. Everything still seems to be working just fine on Mac. So let's stop that, and then now let's come back over here and let's bring our Docker container back up. Now I am going to pause it this time. We'll be right back. Okay, so we just got finished building, and now it's running. And you see here, server will be started on localhost port 8080, and then it shows that we're listening on port 8080. So if everything went correctly, we should be able to pull Postman back up, and it is indeed working. So we can try all our endpoints. That's working. And random appears to be working as well. So we've got our project building and running on Mac. We've got it building and running on Linux. So I'm going to go ahead and Control C, and that will stop this container. So we should be ready to upload everything to Bluemix to get it actually up online so that we can connect to it remotely. One thing I want to mention about running in a Linux container, there's still a caveat with Linux containers, Docker containers, in that the Docker container still uses the host machine's file system. So even though we're running Linux here, it's still using Mac, which is generally a case insensitive file system. And when you run it on a full-blown Linux machine, it's most likely going to be case sensitive. So you just want to be careful and make sure that you pay attention to your case, and everything's case sensitive. But with that being said, let's go ahead and put this up on Bluemix. So I've got my Bluemix dashboard pulled up here. I don't have any apps in here. And later on, when we get to the full-blown API, I will show you how to create an account, set this up. But we want to go ahead and click Create App. And it's going to take me to the app boilerplate code here that we can set up. And you can see they've got a ton of types that you can set up. Now, they're not all the same price. Some of them are higher than others. But what we're looking for is under Cloud Foundry apps, we've got runtime for Swift. So this is where we can create an app by just clicking on runtime for Swift. All right. So for app name, we're just going to do hello-API. And you see here it specifies our host name is hello-API. The domain is mybluemix.net. And then we've got pricing plans down here. You can run one or more apps free for 30 days, 375 gigabyte hours free. And it says right here 7 cents US dollars per gigabyte hour. Now, that may sound a little confusing. It's really not that bad. Basically, what we're going to be creating is a single instance, 256 megabytes. So, if you take that 256 at one instance, it would take 4 hours of that running to equal 1 gigabyte hour. So then you could multiply that by the number of hours, or the number of 31 days, and then that would tell you about how much you would have to pay. But now you get 375 gigabyte hours free. And let me get this set up, and I'm going to go back and show you something here. So I'm going to go ahead and click Create. So it's creating our app, and then once it does, it takes us to this Getting Started tab and walks us through how to push that up to the server, to Bluemix. Now, one thing I want to show you real quick. See if I can do this in a new tab. I've had a server running pretty much nonstop for the last 30 days. I just deleted them today, as a matter of fact. Let me see if I can find what I was looking for. Maybe it's under the usage dashboard. Which now, given my my app wasn't being used hardly at all. But you can see here I've got one runtime app with usage. And it ran 85 gigabyte hours. But you still see that my cost is $0. If you hover over this little runtime app gigabyte hours here, you see here if your app uses 1 gigabyte of memory and runs for 1 hour, you just use 1 gigabyte hour. If you run with 2 gigabytes of memory for 2 hours, you use 4 gigabyte hours. 2 instances of your app using 2 gigabytes each for 2 hours, and you're at 8 gigabytes. It's that simple. And it says there's no catches. In fact, the first 375 gigabyte hours are free every month. This is not just a 30-day trial. It's based on a 31-day month billed by the hour. So if you shut it off, it stops billing. So man, you can run an app, especially for development and testing, and not have to pay anything. And then this is a really cost-effective way to get your app out there. And, as it builds steam, if you start getting a lot of traffic, obviously the more traffic you've got, hopefully you've got a monetization plan set out where you're going to be making more money. But it will scale real easy. You can just up your instances, up your memory. You can add new apps and all that. So to me, Bluemix is one of the most cost-effective solutions I've seen out there. It's really nice. Anyway, let's get back over here to our app. Now, there's a couple things I need to do before we follow these directions. I need to add a few files in here. We need a Swift version file. And that Swift version file just simply needs 3.02 in it, and that's it. It just specifies that we're going to use version 3.02 of the Swift to run our app. I'm going to go ahead and put a CF ignore in here. It's kind of like a get ignore. When you push it up to Cloud Foundry, it will ignore these things you put in here. So I'm going to ignore DS store, build. We don't want to upload our packages because it's going to build it and grab all those for us. We don't need to upload our Xcode project folder. And we don't need to upload our Docker compose.yaml file. So there's our CF ignore. So you see we've got all that. And we're going to need a manifest. So we're going to create the manifest file. And there's documentation about this on in IBM's the Bluemix documentation. They've got really good documentation on everything. Okay. So that's all we need for this manifest file. So basically we're telling it we've got under applications, we've got the name Hello API here. We're going to use 256 meg of memory, which is the smallest we can. We're going to use one instance, set random route to true, disk quota to 1024 meg. Our start command is hello-api, which is our executable. If you'll remember, .build/debug/hello API, that's our command we're going to run. And then build pack is something that we tell. There's different build packs depending on what you're using. So we're using Swift. We need the Swift build pack. There's build packs for Node and other things as well, but that's what we need. So I'm going to save that. And let me look here and make sure I'm not missing anything. I think we're good. So let's turn our attention back over here to the documentation. And like I said, in a later lesson, we'll walk through how to install these command line tools and everything. This is just a walkthrough. So we need to run that command to start, and then I need to log in. So with Bluemix, you've got a user, which is my email here. I've got an organization, which is DevSlopes. And then there's a space, which is kind of like a namespace. It's just DevSlopes with a small d. So once I've got that, I'm going to hit enter or return. And it's going to ask for my password. And I'm going to come off screen here to get my password because I don't remember what it is. And I'm going to paste that in there and hit return. And it's going to authenticate. And it sets everything up for my command line. So now from here, I can do CF apps. And it will show me all the apps that I have in the cloud, which I've got Hello API here. There's no code in it yet. I've just got the app set up. So now at this point, all I have to do is CF push Hello API from that folder. And this is going to upload my files. It's already done uploading. And now it's going to go through the process of building and downloading all the packages it needs and setting up the app. And then we'll be right back once this is done and we'll show it to you. All right, I'm back. I actually had to restart that a couple of times. It gave me an error. And it almost acted like I was having network issues, which is a possibility. But it finally, on the third attempt, it went ahead and uploaded and started building. And after all that was done, it took a few minutes. But you see here, we get app started and we get some OK messages. And it shows app Hello API was started using this command, Hello API. And then it shows our health, and we see we've got 256 meg by one instance. Here's our URL, helloapi.mybluemix.net, using the Swift build pack. And you see here our state, we're running, shows what time it started, CPU use, memory use, disk use, all that. So you see we can do CF apps and we see Hello API is started. Now if I go back here, it shows not running, but that hasn't been updated, I'm going to say. So let me refresh the page. And when I do, you see here now our app is running. So we can pull Postman back up. And I'm going to create a new tab. And this is one thing I didn't even mention out of the box. Is when you host something on Bluemix, it is an HTTPS secure URL. So if you're building an iOS app, you don't have to worry about app transport security. That's handled out of the box. So our URL is hello-api.mybluemix.net. .net. Another thing is we don't have to worry about port 8080 or whatever because it's mapped to port 443, which is HTTPS. So all we have to do is just do our append our route on the end here. So if I hit send on this, we ought to get back, and we do. We get back our JSON, the course name and company here. And if we do vehicles, we get back all our vehicles. And if we do vehicles random, we do indeed get back random vehicles. And so everything appears to be working. So this video was a little long. This is just a simple walkthrough. I just kind of wanted you to get a whole picture of what we're doing here. Now Kitura has a templating engine that you can use along with Bootstrap or something like that to actually build websites with, web applications. This course, we're focused on building APIs for data for our Android, iOS, Windows apps, things like that. And this is an excellent use case for this. And I don't know about you, but what all we just did, that's pretty cool stuff. We built it in Xcode. We ran it on the Mac. We ran it on Linux. We uploaded it to Bluemix. It was a very easy process. Just really cool stuff. At least to me it is. I hope it is to you too. So with that being done, we're going to go ahead and move on, put this one in the books, and we're going to go ahead and get started building our main API for the course. It's going to be quite a bit larger. We're going to use the database. We're going to get into CouchDB and learn how to work with that, and we're going to do some post and update routes and things like that. So let's go ahead and jump over into the next section and get started on that, and we'll see you over there.